Welcome to the Bagel Logic Podcast, the show where Papa Tom spreads wisdom like a smear of cream cheese on an everything bagel. Here's your host, Thom Jennings.
All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the Bagel Logic Podcast, and as promised, every other episode I have a guest. I guess, well, before I begin, I want to thank everybody for listening, for tuning in. We've been doing pretty well numbers-wise. As I've mentioned on other podcasts, I do tend to obsess over those types of things because it's no fun trying to do things and not have anybody listen to them. But today, I have a very special guest, a gentleman by the name of Jim Snyder. And Jim and I met many years ago. We'll kind of talk a little bit about that at a Todd Rundgren event. And I think we actually just spoke recently on the first take that we tried to do on this particular episode that for some reason didn't record. So it's a little less natural and spontaneous as far as the first time that we met. But we figured out that we met many years ago at a Todd Rundgren show on a party bus, and that will come up. But Jim's from Rockford, Illinois, which is the home of the legendary rock band Rockford. Yes, Cheap Trick. And I know that Jim has rubbed elbows with them. Jim does concert photography. He's well known in not just the Todd Rundgren fan community, but in Illinois and beyond. He's had his work has appeared in magazines, on album covers. I mean, the whole nine yards. And we'll also one topic that we'll broach at some point during the conversation is, I mean, it's ironic that you and I met on a party bus, Jim, because you are indeed in recovery, and.
Thank you.
So I think that's certainly a source of pride and something that people out there can relate to as well. But without any further ado, as the French say, Mr. Jim Snyder. Thank you, Jim, for being patient today, getting through some of these technical glitches and being a guest on the Bagel Logic Podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I when you talked to me about asking me what you wanted to talk to me, I was like, oh, really? And what do I have to say? And then other times my ego is like, oh, I got a lot to say, But yeah, I do live in Rockford, Illinois, and I've lived here my whole life. And Rick, Cheap Trick's lead guitar player, songwriter, somewhat singer, just lives probably about 6 blocks from me. And so I get to see him every once in a while, and is Rick just like he is on stage? Yeah, very much so. Very eclectic, interesting character. What's really nice in living here with those guys here is, nobody makes a big deal about him in Rockford. It's just like, hey, that's Rick Nielsen, or, it's all time, and the only other one that's here is Bun, but I don't see him very often. I think he's played last week at a bar here in town. He does a thing called the Bunny Carlos Experience, where he plays with different musicians locally and just kind of keeping him active as such. But yeah, it's a neat thing. I'm not a huge fan. I've seen him a number of times, but it's nice to have somebody famous from your community, and they do a lot of stuff in our community. Rick in particular does a lot of stuff to help the community and in the music area with kids with education. He's a big guy that helped raise a lot of money to renovate an old theater in Rockford called the Coronado. Maybe you had been at when Todd played here with the symphony.
Yep.
But they're big on that kind of stuff. So we're grateful to have them. That's for sure.
I guess the real question is, though, have you ever seen Rick Nielsen without a hat? Because I don't even know that there's many pictures that exist. I mean, I've seen one from really the early days, but he's always wearing the hat. I mean, there's a theory that he's bald and whatnot, but I mean, he can't just wear it all the time in public, does he?
Not all the time. I've seen him in public without it. I've seen him in public without it. I guess I don't pay much attention to that. It's interesting when you see him in town. It's usually one of those crazy, little episodes. He just appears and you look over and you go, oh my God, we have a gas station that's really close to the neighborhood, and I'll see him there, really weird, and he's always very outgoing. It's not like he's a snob and whatever. And people usually don't bother him, but occasionally he'll sit there and just like whatever, and he's the same kind of person he is on stage. He's just very outgoing, kind of talks about stuff, and it's neat, and just like any musician, you don't ask them about their music. You're like, hey, how's the kids doing? And how's life, and just like, oh yeah, it's really good. And then he'll reach into his pocket and he'll grab out a couple of guitar picks and hand you a few guitar picks.
Oh wow,
that's pretty much a normal thing with him around town. At least that's been my experience. Yes.
Yeah, I grew up in Rochester, New York, so we used to see Lou Gramm kicking around all the time from Foreigner because he was a Rochester guy, but kind of similar thing. If he was in the grocery store and you just see him and everything, you might just say, hey, how you doing? And not really think much of it. And a friend of mine lives in Columbus. He said he used to see Eric Clapton, driving around town, and that wasn't as big of a deal. And then I had a relative that used to see Elton John, just hanging out in town in Atlanta when they had a place there. So it's interesting because I know we talked a little bit about the fact that you're a photographer, and I guess you and I get to rub elbows with a lot of different musicians. And there's still times where I have a difficult time not going total, the terminology is always fanboy, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I'm in the presence of, such and such. But at the end of the day, I think you're right. Especially when you see a guy around town a lot, it really puts things into perspective that even though they have this larger than life stage persona, musicians they're not much different than you and me in terms of just how they interact with people. And like I said, they got to get gas at the gas station, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah. It's one of those things you learn kind of early on when you're hanging out with these guys. And I don't mean hanging out. I don't have that kind of access, but, it's what I think makes musicians or famous people uncomfortable is people, putting on them like they're better than or whatever. I think that some musicians or performers like that, but most don't. Most want to be kind of just put back and just like, hey, how you doing, and that kind of thing. And I learned that kind of early on and doing interviews with people and stuff like that. It's just, let's talk about, maybe your family, or let's talk about, what's going on at home or something like that. Let's not talk about the depth of what does Fair Warning really mean? What's that song really all about? And it's like, fuck you.
Yeah.
Figure it out for yourself. You know what kind of deal?
Yeah. I find in my experience that the musicians that are far more difficult to deal with are these ones at the local level who are just incredibly full of themselves that they're standoffish. They have this entitlement about them. And there almost seems to be like a level of fame that a musician reaches where they become more humble, and it's at that lower level. It's just, man, I just had an experience, I think it was last week, with a guy that was trying to book a show at a place where I book some bands, and he was just a complete jerk about it. And I had discussions with some friends last night and said, man, where's the professionalism here? I mean, on some level, you're promoting your brand, you're promoting yourself as a musician, even as a photographer, that there's a decorum, there's a way that you're supposed to act around the artist and you're supposed to act in the venue and to all the people that you interact with. So I still get very put off by people that get super full of themselves. It drives me nuts.
Yeah, it is. I had a funny story I tell every once in a while. I have some friends in town that play locally, and they're my age group, the 60, 65 era and that stuff. And they've been doing it forever. And most of them are pretty decent at the craft they have, to the level they're probably ever going to get to. And his friend always says, so you don't support live music much anymore. And I said, I don't as much as I once did. And I said, part of it is I'm uncomfortable with it. And sometimes the lack of professionalism. I don't photograph a lot of local bands. Every once in a while, a friend will ask me, and I'll come out and I'll do something. But I was in Chicago. This is many years ago, and I was photographing Adrian Belew, and he was playing a club in Chicago, and I went in with a friend, and shot the show, and it was really good, and came home, and I'm pulling into the driveway, and it's about 2:00 in the morning, and my neighbor's coming in the same thing and same time, and he actually is a pretty hot guitar player around town, and has been for decades. And he says to me, he goes, how was the show tonight? And I said, oh, it was really good. And I said, well, how was yours? And he goes, well, it was pretty good too. And he said, now, who did you see tonight? And I said, I was Adrian Ballou. And I said, it's amazing when you see that guy play, that he's just so carefree and happy, and you never see anything but a smile on his face. And, and he's doing some amazing work on the guitar. And I said, it's just a treat to be in his presence when he's playing. And I said, I was talking to him after the show, and, he was telling me how lucky he was that, tonight he's playing Chicago, tomorrow he's playing Milan, Italy, and he gets to go wherever, music takes him. And my friend just laughed. He goes, yeah, I know how it feels. And I go, yeah, he's playing Milan tomorrow. What are you playing at Mary's on Madison, And he just kind of, I think he kind of got the point, and, so we didn't have that conversation anymore, but, it's like 60 years old and you're still trying to make it, and, just have fun with your craft. You don't have to be, that you've passed your window of opportunity. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's funny. I work with, and I do have a lot of artists that reach out to me because of, my part-time vocation with the media. And it's like, you're right. They get to a point where they're in their 60s, 70s, and I get it. Like, you should always chase the dream. I mean, on some level, this podcast is a dream chaser, but I'm also not of the mindset that, I'm going to be the next Joe Rogan. I mean, if it happens, I'd be ecstatic, but if it's something I could do and I can enjoy and it finds an audience, even if it's a small audience, that's cool. I mean, that's who I am. That's where I'm at, and that's okay. Yeah. Would I love to go to Milan to do a live recording with Jim Snyder and a podcast, of course, but yeah, it's, and those guys, you're right. I mean, I feel like they have a different life, and it's gotta be cool. I mean, you do photography, said I do writing and other things like that. It would be great if that could be our vocation, but not everybody's lucky to fall into that. So you just got to accept what you got and say, well, this is cool. It'll work for me.
Yeah. And that's part of the deal. Acceptance is a big deal for me. And it comes a lot from my recovery at times, from my recovery. And I struggle sometimes. I used to struggle a lot. And I finally heard Todd Rundgren say something, and every once in a while he says something that really resonates with me. And he says, I've grown that I can't be criticized anymore by a critic, and it's somewhere on that lines. And I used to always struggle with my work, and I would always look at other people's work and go, what is deficient about my work compared to somebody else's? And because Bob is getting this credibility and I'm not. And, Facebook is a notorious thing where people think that, they're posting something up and their picture or whatever they're putting out is the value of it all based upon how many likes they get. And that's bullshit, and I've gotten to the point where, if I put something up and I get 10 people that like it, cool. If I get 1,000 people that like it, cool. Does that picture that has 1,000 better than the one that has 10? Probably not. It's my baby and I like it. And if you don't, I'm okay with that, and I struggle with it sometimes. And I've gotten into a group of other photographers that are kind of in my pop, where I'm at, they get some notoriety and stuff like that. And we talk kind of regularly about that. And they all have the same kind of ego deflation, that they don't get that respect that they think they should or would. But in the bottom line, they're happy with what they're doing. And I do. And it would be great if, I was, a Lynn Goldsmith and I could go out and, shoot whatever I wanted, whenever I want, but it just doesn't happen. And when I get the okay to say yay, I'm happier than a pig in shit. I mean, I threw my name in the hat for Wilco a couple weeks ago, and they came back with me and said, yeah, you're on the list. And then on Monday they called me and said, well, we've got 8 photographers at each show in Chicago, so we're going to pass on you this time. And you're a little disappointed, but you're like, oh, well, you know what I mean? Been there, done that, That's called life acceptance, right?
Yeah, it is. I don't, it's a lot of that. I mean, I can relate to on some level, but a much lower level. But I know just having to reach out to people to get coverage for a show or whatever. I mean, I think there was a period of time where I could get a little bit, I guess the terminology some people use is butt hurt, like, oh my, how come I'm not approved for this show? I am Thom Jennings of the Niagara Gazette. I write for a newspaper that exposed Love Canal. I'm important. And you get a little bit full of yourself. And I think that that's easy to fall into that trap because, like you said, there is that mentality that is driven through social media, that's driven even amongst certain communities. I mean, I've met and worked with photographers and music writers that do have that sense of I've got one friend who will literally, if I get approved for a show, he will ask me who else got approved, because if he feels that there was somebody else that was approved and he wasn't, that somehow it's a slight to him. They said, well, my goodness, this person writes for a website that is far inferior to mine. How were they approved, but I wasn't approved? And I think that that's a natural human emotion. And, as you said, you being a person that's in recovery, obviously you're sensitive to some certain things. And even though I'm not in recovery, I mean, I'm very sensitive to some things as well. So you always have to kind of check that at the door in a way. And some days it's easy, but like you said, I mean, obviously the Wilco thing, there's a tinge of disappointment, but I think if it comes at a time where, like if you and I were both doing it and everybody that you knew got approved and you didn't, there would certainly be, it would be a little bit different. But it was nice that they at least said, hey, we got 1 billion photographers here, Jim. Can we catch you the next time around? It's nothing personal.
No, it's not. And it's just it's a fun thing. You build some credibility, and you realize that there's only so many people that can do it, and, it's, and in this day and age, there's not a lot of money out there. I know photographers that are good and they're professionals, and they won't do a show just to do a show. They got to be paid, and that's okay. That's their muse. That's how they make their living. I get that. I'm not in that league. Every once in a while, I'll get a paying gig, but I just enjoy being out there and doing it, having fun. And I just joined a new online website, and a friend recommended me to, and I'm getting a little bit more access because I have a media behind me. But I've shot where I had to shoot, 4 or 5 shows a week. And that really bothered me because, I was shooting stuff I didn't want to do. And I didn't really want to be there. And I wasn't giving all of my best to the work I was doing. And so now I really like the idea of being able to pick and choose. And that's fun. And in that process, sometimes you don't, a few years ago, I threw my name in the hat for Van Morrison. And they actually, first time I'd ever been called on an interview. And their publicist called me and said, hey, we like your work, but what could you add? What could you do in photographing Van Morrison that hasn't been done in the last 55 or 60 years? And I said, just my perspective. And she just kind of chuckled and she said, I just wanted to see what you had to say. We're not allowing any photographers. So, whatever, but thanks for reaching out. And I was like, cool. I wasn't mad at all. And it's just interesting how you deal with people in this industry, but, the work I get, I'm grateful for, and I have a lot of fun with it, and it's not my life, but it's what I enjoy doing. I like the whole process. One of my favorite things of doing is, it's kind of frustrating at times. Digital makes things so much easier than it used to be, but I enjoy editing. I really enjoy editing, and I'm not a huge editor, but after show's done, I enjoy coming home, putting it on the computer, letting it season for a couple of days, and then just going and looking at it and see what I really got. And was this what I was looking for? And playing around with that stuff. It's a lot for me. I enjoy a lot. And then, put it out there to the public and seeing what the public has to say about it. And sometimes, everybody's a roar about it. And other times people are like, oh, well, it's just Jim Snyder putting up another picture. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Over the years, I've always appreciated the fact that you are one of the few people in my life that, and maybe on occasion, the old expression is even a blind squirrel gets a nut every now and then. And sometimes I have a pretty decent photo shoot and you'll call me up and say, hey, I saw your pictures and they're really good. And to me, that's a validation, but it is important because I think, as you said, it's tough sometimes if you have any art form and you don't feel like anybody's paying attention, it takes a little bit away from it. But yeah, the editing process, I mean, I've never really had the right equipment to edit to the point that I have. So I think to me, it's just more of a source of frustration. But, and the other thing I think you touched on that's important as well in terms of working in the industry, whether it be part-time or full-time or whatever, it really just does come down to relationships where you have to have a reputation as somebody that's easy to work with, that can bring something to the table. And if you can do that, then your access is going to increase. I mean, having a medium behind you is important, putting out good content, all those types of things. But I mean, I've had those same kind of phone calls where a publicist will take the time and say, hey, we're not giving out photo passes or whatever. And to me, I remember those. And then if for some reason that publicist circles back around and says, oh, by the way, Jim, or oh, by the way, Tom, Bob Jones is coming through town and they could really use a break and a little bit of coverage. Can you help me out? Well, sure. As long as I'm not doing anything that night, but And that's how it works. It doesn't, like we were talking about before, it's not that sense of entitlement. They don't owe us anything in terms of giving us a photo pass. If you get a photo pass, it's a gift, and it's
very much.
It's respect. I mean, that's an artist showing you some form of respect. So I agree. I think that those experiences are still exciting, gratifying. That's sort of the aspect of the non-artistic aspect of photography or music writing or any of that stuff that's just very important that people don't really think about.
Yeah, for sure. If I get into that situation where I'm entitled, I'm the loser every time, almost every. And if I just roll with the punches, amazing things happen. And most of the things that have come my way have come by accident, and those things have been just amazing. They just floor you. I mean, I just a bunch of years ago, well, it'd be like 2 years ago when Todd did that Clearly Human tour. I got a call and they asked me to be there, and if I could be there, and I was like, sure, and it was just a great experience, and it's happened many times over the years with different stuff. And, it's how do you work with the artist? How do you work with the performer? Whatever. Do I make mistakes? Yeah, I do. But, I try to not, and to learn from it. It's just kind of similar to my business. I've been in business for about 25 years doing what I do for a living. And, when I'm trying to make things happen, usually it falls to shit. But when I just do the next right thing and put one foot in front of the other, amazing things happen. And that's just kind of how my life's always been. And I don't know. It's, I don't know. I feel in some ways that I'm rather, I'm very grateful for what these experiences I've had in 61 years of, shaped my life, and most of the things I didn't really plan. They just kind of happened. I put one foot in front of the other and it was there, I don't know. I still today don't know how I'm still in business 25 years later. And doing the thing what I'm doing. I was always afraid I wanted to be dependent on somebody else to help me, and I don't have that anymore, and I haven't for a long time, and I enjoy it. And
your business is is it property management, or what is
yeah,
it specifically?
yeah,
Okay, that's what I thought.
yeah. I've been in rental property management, maintenance, upkeep, ownership, all that stuff for, I don't know, 1993, somewhere like that. And I enjoy it. I was kind of forced into it to go into business for myself. I worked for somebody for a bunch of years, and everything kind of went upside down with them. They made some mistakes on their part, and the business went under. And the guy said to me, he goes, "Jim," he says, I've left your name and some great references with some bankers in town here, and I think you can make this thing flourish." And I was absolutely petrified. I was 2 years sober, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I didn't really want to go back to working for Big Brother again. And, I just put one foot in front of the other. And sometimes I was afraid, but I did it anyways. And it's worked out really well for me. And I'm grateful for that.
So do you credit your sobriety with being, putting you in a position to be able to have the confidence to go and out on your own? I mean, you said you were 2 years sober, so I would imagine that, obviously you were still dealing with, and again, I don't know because this is your story, but I mean, I would imagine you were dealing with some demons at that point still, just being 2 years in, and then to go into a business venture. I mean, that's got to be pretty daunting on some level, isn't it?
It is. And the one thing that recovery has kind of taught me is that I'm only as good as the people around me. And I need help and assistance because I'm not that smart. Sometimes my ego tells me I am, and I can do all those things. But I need somebody to kind of encourage me, attaboy, or, just Jim, put one foot in front of the other, whatever. And so I found in keeping my business successful, I've had to have people around me that can bring me up. Cause I'm not like Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, probably greatest basketball player of all time. Michael Jordan brought other people up. He didn't have anybody bring him up. He raised people up. I'm not that kind of a person. I have to have people. I'm kind of like a Scottie Pippen, even though I hated the Bulls. Scottie Pippen needed somebody like Michael Jordan to bring him up to the level he was. And once Michael wasn't around, Scottie Pippen was pretty much a has-been. But that's my opinion. But I need people around me that can help lift me up. And I need sounding boards out there and say, hey, this is what's going on in my head. Is this real or is this imagined? And then I get that feedback, and then I start realizing what really is real and what's not imagined, what's imagined. And, there's people in the fandom that have encouraged me to continue doing what I'm doing for a long time. And, every once in a while I question myself, and then I go back to them and say, hey, and they're like, no, Jim, no. Just keep doing what you're doing. You know what I mean? And it's the same way with business and family and the whole nine yards, and, I don't know. I'm grateful for that. And when I forget that, that's when I'm flounder. I flounder a lot. I talked to you the other day when we were talking, a month and a half ago, I got in a really bad car accident, and I didn't think it was a big deal at first. I'm laying in an emergency room hospital, and I'm grateful I'm alive, and and all that stuff. And I just broke my leg. I cracked my tibia, and it was non-displaced, so it would heal if I stayed off it. And I was so afraid I was going to lose my business. And, I'm coming into a season where things are starting to pick up again. And, I was just riddled with fear. And I called some friends and I said, hey, and I called some people that I do business with and said, hey, and like, don't worry, just take care of yourself. Just take care of yourself. Just take care of yourself. You'll be okay. And after I got in my accident, I woke up, I came to in a field, in a country field. And I didn't know how I got there. And when I was in the ambulance, I had this vision of this person coming up to my car and talking to me. But I didn't know if it was real or not, or if maybe it was just something that I was imagining. And it was a woman that I knew from one of my recovery groups.
Wow.
And when I was sitting I was in the hospital, laying on the gurney, and I had my phone. I looked out at my phone, and this person texted me, and she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." I said, "How do you know that I'm okay?" And she said, "Don't you remember me coming up to your window and seeing if you were okay?" And I said, "Vaguely," but I thought maybe my mind was playing with me. And she said, "No." She said, I saw your truck in the field, and I left my 2 kids in the car and walked over to make sure you were okay." And I called her and thanked her, and then she told me what happened after the accident. And I crossed 4 lanes of traffic on a major highway, unconscious. I could have been T-boned, and they could be having interesting stuff. And so I've struggled with that, the recovery of this, getting my leg back together and getting back to work again and stuff. And it's been that, but I've tried not to be a whiny ass little bitch to my wife.
Oh, there's a lot of guys that heard that could totally relate. It's I broke my leg running a marathon years ago, and I was only, it wasn't nearly as serious as what you had in terms of an accident or any of that other stuff, but man, that I think it was 8 weeks in a cast, and it was just a nightmare. I know you're an active guy. You always got your hand in about 3 or 4 different things. I'm kind of the same way, and it's frustrating to be dependent on other people, but I think that again, you touched on it in that, recovery, even whether it's a physical ailment like a broken leg or recovery from addiction, it's still, you're dependent on other people. And as human beings, I think sometimes we get in our own way because we think that there's nothing we as individuals can't overcome by ourselves. But we really do need each other. And, stopping and your friend stopping and getting out of the car and leaving your kids in the car. She didn't have to do that. That's almost biblical in the Good Samaritan type proportions, because I'm sure there was a lot of other people that just kept driving across the highway and said, "Oh, it's a shame that poor guy's over on the side of the road with his truck. I hope he's okay, but I got to get home to my Chick-fil-A,"
Yeah, it's all amazing how it happens. And what else is funny in the situation is, they got me out of my vehicle and got me in an ambulance. And the woman that attended me in the ambulance is a tenant of mine.
Wow.
And, she looked at me and she said, "Do you know who I am?" And I said, "Yeah, of course I know who you are." And she said, "What's my name?" And I said, "Well, I can't remember your name. I'm terrible with names at some points. I'm terrible with names." And I said, "But I know your address." And this is, I riddle off her address, and she goes, "Okay, we're good."
Yeah.
And, and it's just amazing how those things happen. A friend of mine told me, and this hit me really hard 31 years ago. I got sober April 7th, 1991. And I'm not bragging about that at all. And just, that's the fact. This old guy that's now gone said to me, "If you do a few simple things and you do those things on a daily basis, you'll learn in life you never fathomed." And the problem is you have to do these few simple things on a daily basis. And if you keep doing those things, you'll get that life you never understood. And I have. And I'm not one that goes out there and pontificates my story to everybody out there. But if somebody has a question and they want to know how I did it, I'm more than happy to share how I did it. And, it took some time. I built some relationships. I built some friendships. I got maybe out of myself a little bit to reach out and ask for some help. And I've had a life I never expected to have. I never expected to have. And, it's funny because every once in a while I'll be out and about and somebody will go, well, I've been thinking about getting sober, and and I'll talk to them, and if they want to talk, and it's like, this is what I had to do. And they're like, well, I don't know, that seems like a lot of work and whatever. And I said, but think about how much work it is to stay where you're at right now. And I said, this whole thing is about change. And if you don't change, nothing's going to happen, And, most of this miraculous things in my life have all happened from just not picking that drink up a day at a time,
Yeah. Yeah. I find, my dad was an alcoholic, and he kind of floated in and out. He was a different kind of alcoholic. Like, he wasn't the kind that drank on a regular basis. He would just go on a bender and then get really violent.
That was me.
Then he couldn't drink, and then he'd not drink for 2 or 3 years, and then he'd go on a bender and get really violent, mess everything up, and then he'd have to go back. And it was a horrible roller coaster that I witnessed as a child, and it was so difficult. But I think that in success, like in anything, and a lot of times, I guess I'll put it this way. I think sometimes when it comes to conversations about recovery, and I'm speaking from my perspective, not necessarily yours, because you're in recovery, so you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. So I think so many people focus on the event, like whatever it was, that that low point and all that other stuff. But to me, that's never really the story. And I guess it's because I lived with a person who really had that day-to-day struggle, and those drunken moments and all those other things that for some reason people find fascinating, to me were very traumatic. They were just horrible incidents that you're actually trying to move past and not necessarily remember. So I think in terms of you, for example, I felt that every conversation that we've had, like you said, it's never been pontificating. It's never been, you're not trying to convert me into any mindset or whatever. It's always been very non-judgmental, but we've always talked about the journey. It's never been about the starting line, because I feel like, am I right to say, like, it's a situation with my dad, like that starting point and that low point? Who wants to continually revisit that part? Because that's kind of the part that you're trying to redefine. Like, I don't want to be defined as the guy who got drunk and smashed up his house and beat his kids and now is in recovery. I want to be the guy that's in recovery and the good guy that and not defined by those ugly actions that could have happened. And again, I don't think that everybody has that ugly story, like, I burned the house down or shot somebody or anything like that. But certainly there seems to be this fascination with that story when it comes to recovery, and not enough from the outside world in, like you said, 2 years after recovery, I started my business. Well, to me, that's the story. The real story isn't what happened 2 years before. The real story is what happened 2 years later.
Right. And it's that evident process. I was probably similar to your dad in some ways, but I wasn't a daily drinker. There were stretches I would drink daily, but I'm what we would consider a binge drinker. I would drink, and if I had one, I didn't know when I was going to stop. And, and then I would cool it out for a while and think, okay, I got this under control, and da 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 da. And, it was that cyclical cycle of bullshit that I was dealing with, and cleaning up this mess all the time. And inside, I didn't really verbalize that to other people because I didn't want to be thought of as less than. I wanted to think that I still had my shit under control. At least I wanted you to think I did. And, I had dealt with that for a number of years, and I got sober. I was 29 years old. And my story is, one day I went to work, and I didn't have the worst drunk of my life. I don't even remember if I drank the night before. But I left with my employer where I was working, and on my lunch hour, and I was walking down the street to go grab something for lunch. And there's a treatment center there. And I walked in at my lunch hour and said, I think I got a problem. And I remember turning my head and looking behind me and said, who the fuck said that? Because, I wasn't going to disclose that to anybody. And that's how the journey started. And I didn't know that day that that's what I was going to do. And I'm grateful that I took that step. Somebody once told me a long time ago, and it happened to me in recovery, and I don't get all my stories from recovery, but they said, when that window of opportunity opens, if you don't walk through it, you may never get another opportunity. And so I try to live my life that way. And, I found that I have always been a mentor-based person, that I need somebody to help mentor me, because I might be bright, but I'm not that smart. And every once in a while, I'll throw those comments out there, and somebody will say, I was obsessing a bunch of years ago about retirement. I'm 60, and, we get to that point where, thinking about retirement. And it's funny. I was in Chicago, and I was doing some Todd Rundgren shows. I had like two shows in a row, and then I was doing some other stuff for them. And I happened to give Todd Rundgren a ride in my car. He was doing a promotion for the Blue Man Group, and they'd asked me if I would go and take some photographs of him with the Blue Man Group crew, and so I did. And we're standing out front of the theater, and he was going to do some publicity with his wife's band, the Intoxicats, and he was looking at my car, and I've got a little yellow Honda S2000 convertible. And he was looking at my car, and he was like, kind of like he was liking it. And I said, "Oh, you like that car?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "Is it yours?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Would you like a ride?" And he's like, "Yeah, can we have the top down?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And it was a nice day. And he got in the car, and, what do you talk to Todd Rundgren about in the presence of your car for about 45 minutes to drive, or half an hour of this drive? And we talked about some little things, and I said something to him about retirement. And he said, "Retirement? It's fucking overrated." He looked at me and he goes, "How old are you, Jim?" And I was like, "I'm 57. He goes, "I'm 67 or 68 at the time." And he goes, "Retirement? Are you fucking kidding me?" And it kind of got me off of that thing. And he said, "You always got to have something to do. And, do the best with what you have. And you'll never find you need to retire. That you just keep doing that thing over and over and over. And whatever gives you pleasure will make your life full." And I remember that. And we weren't talking about a song or anything like that. We were just talking about what was going on between our two ears at the time. And it still resonates with me. And when I get on an obsession, it's like, I want to be out in 3 years or whatever. I couldn't sit still for three. I couldn't sit still. I got to be doing something,
Yeah, I relate 100%. I mean, I'm 55, and it's, we've had just financial disasters in our life. So we definitely, my wife and I definitely don't have the money to retire. So I'm already mentally resigned to the fact that, I'm going to be working or doing whatever. But I think, like you said, it's on some level, I think work gives you purpose. And I think if you're the type of person, I know in my case, I am, as my mother used to say, an idle mind is the devil's playground. So certainly my not doing things is giving the devil an opportunity to play in the brain. So I guess it's weird because, like you said, there's such a societal expectation on some level. I think, and I'm very conflicted. Even I wonder what your opinion is on this, like with this whole millennial stereotype of these lazy workers that are coming into the workforce or whatever. But I think on some level, what they've seen is they've seen their parents killing themselves, working 1, 2, 3 jobs, and then really having nothing to show for it in retirement. And they're almost to the point where they go, well, heck, if I can work at home, I'll do that. If I can work 30 hours, I'll do that. And on some level, I don't even begrudge them for that. I think that they're smart, but I mean, I would rather have, if I could do it over again, I'd love to be in a situation where, yes, I could work X amount of hours a week, but not kill myself and still devote more time to things like, podcasting, photography, music writing, all that other stuff. But yeah, retirement in terms of just sitting in a chair and, sipping martinis or whatever, it just doesn't appeal to me. I don't want to be broke either. I mean, and it's so hard these days just to set yourself up financially to live and not work. I mean, I saw my mother go through it. It was tough. When my mother died, like, we didn't even have enough money. She didn't have enough money in her account to pay for her funeral or get a headstone or any of that stuff. And she worked for a bank for, 30 years and had nothing to show for it. It's crazy. It's sad.
Yeah. It is, and, we've been really good as, again, the people around me, I've used as sounding boards and kind of suggested some things early on. And, did I always want to do those things? No. But I did. And I tried and I tried and I tried and I tried. And, we can rub a few nickels together. But in the final analysis for me, will I be able to, I think I will give up what I do for a living at some point. I will probably always do something. I don't know what it will be. Maybe I'll be doing shit for the city, taking pictures around the city or something like that, of kids or, something like that. I got to be doing something, and yeah. You always think, well, I want to travel and do this and do this and do this and do this and do this. And yeah, maybe I'll do that, but that can get boring too. My brother-in-law, he just more money than most people could ever imagine having, retired at 59 and sat out for a year and just was absolutely bored, And he now works 3 days a week for Habitat for Humanities. And he does it for free, and he's having more fun than he's ever had in his life, he said. And, he's not making any money doing it, but he's doing something that seems valuable. And then he can go out and do the things that he wants to do, like, travel and stuff like that. But it keeps him whole and keeps him vital. And that's what I will probably find. I don't know what that's going to be. I don't know. My wife said, maybe you should photograph weddings. And I was like, fuck that. When I find out what these photographers are making for weddings, I'm just like, maybe I should be doing that. But
it's a whole nother animal. I mean, I don't know what it's like now. I was a wedding DJ when I was younger. I did it for 17 years, and man, I don't know. It just was. It's fun, but it's very time consuming, and man, it is what it is. I'm thinking I'm probably just going to be a Walmart greeter. I mean, I feel like that's going to be. I'm that guy. I could do it.
Yeah, I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know what it's going to be. And if I knew, I really don't want to know, because that takes out a lot of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, it's like, I don't know how I want to say this, but it may sound kind of weird, but, I really do believe that if I died tonight, I would be okay. If I knew that there was something that was going to take me out, I really do think that I'd be okay with it. I have been able to do some things that I've only imagined. And I've been able to do some of them many times. And I've had some experiences that were just absolutely amazing, as we all have. Some of them are really big things, and some of them are really small things that meant a lot to me. That inside, I know that I did the walk I was supposed to walk. My wife once said to me, she said, Jim, we're not going to spend eternity together. And I said, what the fuck are you talking about? And she said, well, you don't believe the same way I do. And I said, so you're telling me that St. Peter is going to keep me out of the holy gate because I'm not, this devout Christian, And I said, you know what, if that's the case, fuck them. I said, I've tried in a bunch of years to do the best I could, to try not to hurt other people intentionally, to try not to hurt myself, and to have somewhat of an empathetic ear, and to maybe not be so spiteful with my tongue. But occasionally I get caught up in that if he's going to keep me out for that, or they're going to keep me out for that, pluck them. You know what I mean? And, I think I try to live those early, maybe Christian ideas. And so I'm pretty okay with that. I don't sit around thinking about it very much at all. My life's still an open book. And, if I get another day, I'm good with that. You know what I mean? And I don't know, the recovery thing I struggle with at times, not my recovery, but, other people telling me how to do it. And still being sober a long time, people telling you how to do it. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just taking this baby a day at a time. And yeah, I am in recovery, but recovery isn't all of who I am. I'm me, and I got sober or clean to live my life to its fullest. And, you'll see me at times, maybe at a gathering, and, people are getting a little crazy. And if you see me walk away, it's not because I don't want to be with you. I just feel uncomfortable. Because when people get like sloppy and weird, that reminds me of who I was. And so that I will walk away from that and just do what I need to do, for myself. And I'm not criticizing that particular person or those group of people or whatever. It's just, it's not where I want to be at that moment, And so I always like to, whenever I go someplace, have my own out so that I can just get out of there and go, oh, okay, And sometimes I just go back to my hotel room and relax, or, take a walk or whatever. That kind of gets me to the other side of whatever it needs to be. But I've met some amazing people in the journey, and I consider you one of those. When we talk, I have fun and we enjoy it. Do we always agree? No. But we agree enough that it's a friendship, a good friendship. And I built a lot of people like that, And, there's people out there that just don't like me, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, well, we both have that. I mean, but I appreciate your kind words. I feel the exact same way. I feel very fortunate that we have met, and I think that friendship is a tricky thing sometimes. And I think people think that you have to have proximity. You have to be in the same zip code all the time, but sometimes it's just calling at the right time. And I know I think we kind of call each other at just some random opportunity, but it always feels like it comes at a time where we both benefit from it. At least that's how I feel. Like it's whether it's a conversation as trivial as a new record that came out or something like that, or something that is more said in depth, kind of like a lot of the stuff that we've talked about today, which is, life and death situations, recovery, family, depression, happiness, all those things that everybody has on their journey. And we live in a world where there's so many superficial interactions on social media and things like that I think we forget the importance of being able to just have authentic conversations about things that don't just suck, but things that are good, things that we're happy for,
Yeah. And I'm not one of those kind of guys, and I have friends that they just want to text. And, they want to send you a text, and they want to go in about texting or whatever. And I really shy away from that, because I don't know how you feel. And
I hate text messaging. I'm with you 100%. I think the problem with it is that you can't necessarily ascertain tone. It's just to me, it's just a recipe for disaster. And I think people can say things in written form in a back and forth situation like a text message that could be damaging forever. And if nothing else, if you say something to an individual, you can hear their tone, you understand what they're coming from. There's ways to recover any potential damage from that. Whereas if something lives forever in text form, I call it Richard Nixon syndrome. Record all your conversations and then be shocked that you're arrested. Well, the evidence is there. Sometimes things need to happen, and there doesn't need to be evidence so that you can move on from that.
Yeah. I like, as you mentioned too, that tone inflection, because I know where you're at when you're talking, and that gives me comfort, and I know where you're at, and you may say something that may be critical, and I know why. But in a text, I don't get any of that feel. There's no feeling, there's no emotion, there's no nothing. And I like that. I'm still that old school guy, and I don't think I'll ever change that, because, somebody will go on with me about a text, and I said, hey, why don't you just pick up the phone? Here's my phone number. Give me a call.
Yeah. I think text messaging is good for quick bits of information. Hey, guess what? I'm going to be in town next week. What are you doing? This is what I need you to pick up at the grocery store. Those types of things. In terms of but it really has gotten to the point where it's been used as a conversational tool that, I don't know, I just don't think it has any benefit. But on that note, we're at a good 55 minutes, which is right where we need to be to wrap up this particular episode. And Jim, there was some great stuff in here, man. I really appreciate it. I think it's tough sometimes when you're in a situation where you don't really, things aren't scripted or whatever. But again, that's where I think people can learn some things and maybe put some things in perspective. So hopefully everyone listening enjoyed it as much as I did conducting this interview. I've met some just amazing people and got to know them a lot better through this format. So it's kind of a process for me as well. But you were a perfect guest, so I appreciate that. And the only thing that I wish is that we were, again, in the same zip code. So I hopefully soon we'll be able to kind of connect on some level in person. Because, man, I just love having a cup of coffee with you and just seeing the face.
I enjoy that stuff too. And it's one of those things. That we built this this grassroots thing, and I'm so grateful to be part of it. From a certain point that I've been part of, that, a lot of us met each other through Todd Rundgren, and, we started this grassroots thing where we would see each other and and those were all fun. And they're always fun when we're together. But they're so distant apart. And I have so many friends that I don't see anymore because I'm either not part of that thing or there's nothing going on. And sometimes you feel alone because you don't see that or those people or whatever. It just progresses on. And when you do, it's kind of like really comforting. I was on a podcast not long ago, not a podcast, but we were talking over Messenger, and a friend that I met, I've only met once in my life. And I emulate his photography. I really emulate his work. And he helped me out at a really bad time in my life. And a few years ago, I got to meet him. I got to go over to Amsterdam and meet him. And we occasionally will talk like this because we're too far apart to physically see each other. And they're special every time I get to do that. You know what I mean? And I just enjoy that a lot. And that's generally what I do nowadays if I can't get to somebody, But I'm always out there. I'm grateful for you asking me. I didn't know what I was going to say. I was like, whatever. What do I got? I'm just a nickel and dime drunk. No,
that's not true. I mean, again, it really goes both ways because it's an honor to have people that are even willing to do this because it is for a lot of people kind of trying to get out of their comfort zone. I mean, I've been in the same situation, but I think it's, again, the importance of this is there are people that can hear something, maybe something that finds them. That's, it's kind of like the woman that found you in your car. Hopefully this podcast, this episode in particular, finds somebody, and maybe the series finds it. But either way, it's it's a labor of love, even though the title has bagel in it, which everybody always thinks it's a podcast about bagels. I don't even mention bagels that often anymore. So it's kind of funny. Yeah. It was just a play on Steely Dan's pretzel logic. So I wanted it to be a little more circular. So at least you understood that. But let me wrap this up for everybody out there listening. And then you and I will probably spend a couple minutes afterwards and everything just saying farewell. But yeah, super. Thank you so much for being on today. This was some great stuff. And, anybody out there, any comments, ratings, and any of that kind of stuff to help us grow the podcast. And hey, if you want to be a guest, reach out to me. I don't even have to have ever met you to be a guest, because I just love talking to people and hearing their stories. And, we've all got something. We've all got something that's great. We've all got something that's okay. And we've all got stuff that's difficult. So that's kind of where we're at. But again, everybody, thanks for listening to the Bagel Logic podcast, and we will catch you